ga-emezuru na mmaje pụrụ mmaje n'aha Jizọs. N'otu aka ahụ kwa ya na-asịkwa ana m ekenekwa ndị niile si ebe dị iche iche wee bịa mmemme a okwu unu ji wee bịa ka unu ga-eji ala ga-aka ya mma n'aha Jizọs. Biko ana m ayọ ihe ọbụla anyị ga-eme ebe a n'ụbọchị taa ka ọ gaa n'ịchafụ n'ịchafụ maka na amaara m na ọtụtụ si ebe si dị anya wee bịa, so ụfọdụ oge nwekwara ike ịlachi ya n'ụbọchị nke taata na be ha afụgogo m ọjị mana afụbeghị m ọjị, afụgo m ọjị mana afụbeghị m ọjị, so biko sị ha wepụtara ya ọjị ka emee mmemme dị n'elu ya.
Bịa ka ị gọziere ọhaneze ọjị. Ahụ ihe ka ubi ere ọba egbubiri ndị ọgụ labiri ya Highness, biko gọziere anyị ọjị. Ma esi eme egozi ha ncha
otu dị ihe eso ndị ọga ma ọ na-abịara ole ọ na-abịara ole nye nwe egozi ọnụ chabilawash ma ọnụ zaọnụ kara ọnụ biko anyị enwe n'ọjị ọnụ bịagodo nke ihe niile amachara anyị nye ọnụ ma anyị enyedo ọnụ ọjị ọnụ ga-asọ ọnụ bịara ma ọ wee nyedoro ọnụ ọjị ọ ya ka ọ ya ọjị dị ihe chairman of this occasion asị riri ma mkpu ma onye kere nụ mara onye nwoke kwụrụ ga nga ha ya pụọ na agbara ala ha sa agbara ala ha nnọọ m kelekwa na onye nwoke si ya ama agbara ala ha mmụ maka na onye ọrụ so ya wụrụ ka bụrụ ile so nke ka mma gị nwe ndị gara ha akwụ kama anụrụ m sọ nchi agbaje ma headmaster CAA Ọnụọha mgbe anyị na-aga skuul na Rivers ka ama m na ọrụ onye agbaje enwere ike ọnụ ma onye otu dị ihe ezi
Ibo mman one zon amezuelu omenala eze anyị birikwa ndị nze niile n'ebe a onye chịrị ya zere ndị ebere be ha emere n'anyị ọjị a na-asị ka Chineke nụrụ ọtụtụ n'aha Jizọs. Ka ihe si wee dịrị ama m ma ọjị a ga-edemegide ya n'akụkụ oke ngwanụ eze anyị ngwanụ ọjị eze ọ lara n'eze n'aka
asị ekwuziri ọkụ ọnwa ya ana m onye anya biko ụmụnna anyị enwere na ọjọọ ma ndị ọgọ ma ndị enyi ma ụmụ ma ụmụada aka niile nọ n'ọjị na ndị rie ndị eri butere nnukwu ndị ekwe anyị sị na biko abịa nọrọ ọjị gosiere anyị. Nna m gwara m sị na ị na-akwado ịga ahịa nwanna m bịakwute si gị duga na nwaanyị gị hapụ gị ahịa duga na nwaanyị na ọwa ebe ahụ ka uru ka mgbe Jizọs Kraịst afọ ọ nọchara ihe niile ọ nọ bifo ebido ọrụ ebe ọ ga na-alụ nwaanyị ka o bidoro ọrụ ebe ọgụ ihe gosi na ọ bụ ezigbo ihe ka anyị bịara so ndị niile bịara nga ọ dị ije ọjọọ ka ọ bịara ọgụ ije ọma ọnụ ga-agara lara asị m ndị agbaje ihe ọnụ ga-enye anyị akwakwụrụ ọnụ Igbo ka ụmụ ọwa ga-enye ọnụ agịda akwa anyị Igbo ihe ọ sitere n'aka ya ọnụ ga-ahụzi ka anyị sitekwa n'aka ọnụ anyị ga-ahụzi ya anyị so ụmụ anyị na-ejikọta ọnụ ka anyị bụrụ ịgba aka ebe agaghị amụgo otu ụlọ ji ike dịkwa ha ịma abụọ ma atọ ha ma a ga-asịcha ha anyị sị na biko ihe ọma mere ha ya mekwere anyị asị onye nwere okorobịa na-aga n'ihe a na-eji ya anya agbata ka ezinụlọ tupu enwere ya ọkụ ya etige nnu n'ofe ọ gụda atụrụ ya ya mụta ọkpụrụ ọ ga-akụ mgbụrụ maka ọ hụrụ ka onye ọzọ a na-eji ya anya asị onye apakụrụ moto n'ọnụ ama ya asị bupụ gị ọ gụda apakị nga ya maka ọnwụ onye ọzọ ọsọ nwa ya pakụrụ ọ gụda asị bupụ gị ọ nọchiri ya ụzọ ọ maka ọnwụ onye ọzọ anyị sị onye na-akọ ọnụ naanị Chukwu nyewe ọnụ naanị onye na-akpa aka ọ ga-erekọta aka ọ ga-enye ọha Chukwu enye ka ọ ga-ere ọ ga-enye ka ọ ga-enye ọha anyị sị kama anyị ga-abụ ndị ọrụ na anyị nwere ndị onye maka aka na-enye enye na-anọ n'elu asa a na-akpa aka ya na-ewe ụmụnna dị ma anyị kpata aka ụmụnna dị iri anyị sị na biko ihe niile bịara nga ha ga-agara lara anyị sị na biko ọhịa ga-eruo n'isi usoro ruo n'isi kama ọ ga-epe ọ ga ndị ọ hapụ n'ụlọ bịawa nga ọ ga-alagodo ha n'udo kama ha ga-epe ha ṅụọ nwa sụ nwaanyị bụ ime amụọ na nwa ya wee mụọ nwa anyị sị na biko a bịa nọrọ ji agụzi anyị ga-ata atata ndụ tata ọganihu tata ọmụ sị na Kraịst wụ onye ụmụ ụwa
eze dara mma ebe ochie ọ dị m ka a ga-emekwa protocol ọzọ.
Ifeyinwa. All our mobility personal design. This is personal design Catherine. Nna bandi ụmụọwa. Ọ bụrụ na ile anya ebe anyị a na-ebe a bụ keeki aba n'oge were akpa ya achịcha. Keeki ka ọ dị mkpụrụ okwu ahụ mebere ya CAKE. C stand for caring. Egosi na di na nwaanyị ga-ekọta onwe ha anya. A affection stand for love. N'ọdụ nwere ncheta ha n'ụbọchị nke taa. Nke nọ na-eji amamihe na Chineke onye ha ha ga-eji ọtọ onwe ha. E endurance ndidi. When I Chineke ha nye obi ndị ha ga-eji na-eji ihe ọtọ ụlọ ha si ụtọ onwe ha. Keeki bụ ihe ọma. Ọ ga-ata keeki ebe ihe ọmụrụ aha Jizọs Kraịst bụ onye nwe anyị. Praise the Lord.
Yes, biko kọrọ anyị aka. Biko ugbu a ke anyị achịcha ga-acha mmadụ ga-ekwu ihe a ga-agụ ma ha na-awa ya ma ka ha na-eme ya n'ihi na ọ ga-awa ozi nke anyị a ga-akpọpụta ofu nwoke ofu nwaanyị ndị nke ga-agba aka ebe dị na ebe a kọrọ ihe ahụ ọ ga-ana ebe achịcha ga-agba aka ebe mgbe a ga-awa achịcha. Okay, my own brother nọ here gbara ya aka ebe mgbe a ga-awa achịcha ndị ekwe otu esi ede ya ma iche a gwa ihe a ga-ekwu na obibi ya.
Igbo mma mmanụ ama m akwadozigo maka ịwa achịcha nwa anyị ma na ọnọdụ anyị na ebe a na enwe onye mere ka ọ dị otu a so aga m asị akpa afọ ya espel ọhala afọ ahụ ọ na-awara ya achịcha onye ahụ bụ Jizọs so ka m na-espel ya ka ọ nọ na-akwado ka ọ ga-esi wa ya ndị na-agbakwa aka ebe ama m ha nọ nso J E S U and S. Please clap for them. Wando said, "I was there and
Biko kọrọ anyị aka nne m kwu asị ihe ọbụla a na-eme nwaanyị ga na-enwe isi oge na ihe nwere mgbe a na-nwaanyị.
Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. Ihe m onwe m hụtara na mmadụ na-abụọ awara achịcha ma ugbu a ha wụ ofu. Oge a na-awa achịcha aka nke nwaanyị dị n'ala aka nke nwoke dịkwasị ya n'elu. So mgbe onye chairman na-ekwu maka ịwa achịcha a na-akpọ Jizọs maka ịwa achịcha, so ha abụọ jiri nwayọọ megide ruo mgbe o kwuru okwu ikpeazụ ha were nwayọọ wee gbubie achịcha. So ihe nghọtara na ya wụ na ha abụọ ga-ewere ofu obi mee ihe ọbụla ha na-eme biri n'udo n'aha Jizọs Kraịst bụ onye nwe anyị.
Biko kọrọ anyị aka Ross.
Hallelujah. Biko ahụ ihe m ji guzoso nso ka m ike hụzie ha ọma. Ahụrụ m mgbe a na-egbubi achịcha aka nke nwaanyị nọ n'ala dịka onye gbara aka ebe mbezi ugba nke nwoke aka ya nọ n'elu. Mmayọ Chineke si site na mgbọrọ na mgbe aka tochukwu oge na-anọ n'elu n'aha Jizọs. M hụkwara nke nwaanyị mgbe ọ na-achọ ịkọtụ igbubi achịcha ahụ ọ mere ka ọ dị ọsịsọ na tochisi ya chere na ha ga-akọtụ ya otu mgbe ka gosiri na ha ga na-eme ihe ọbụla ha na-eme n'otu ubi. dịka nke nwaanyị aka ya nọ n'ala aka too chi nọ n'elu o gosiri na nke nwaanyị gị na-anọ n'ala mgbe ọbụla onwe mgbe ọbụla ga-arịgo too chi n'elu tozie gị n'anya n'elu n'aha Jizọs.
Biko kọrọ na aka ihe ọma onwe m hụkwara mgbe a na-ekwu ihe ewo na nwaanyị a ga-adị ime taa mụọ ejima n'aha Jizọs. Onye m hụrụ ọnụ ga-ahụ ụlọ ya. Biko kọrọ na aka ugbu a biko agbanyela ndị mmadụ mmanya ọnụ ga-akwụ ụnụ were kọpụ ụnụ kee mmanya gbanye mmanya nna kedu ndị ashebin were adị onye ebe inyere enyi ya ka enyechara ya ọfụma mgbe a mụrụ ụmụaka ibe ha. Biko kọrọ na aka a na-enye ndị mmadụ mmanya ha abụọ gụkwa n'akwụkwọ mgbe ụmụaka ibe ha gụrụ akwụkwọ. Biko kọrọ na aka ọ ga-erukwe mgbe ụmụ ebiri ha na-alụ di na nwunye ha abụọ lụkwara di na nwunye. Biko kọrọ na aka agbagara ndị mmadụ mmanya ma chairman na-ewebe mmanya. Biko nye mmanya onye ọbụla were elu iko elu ọnụ ga-akwa iko ugbu a na-egbu ọgụ ọnụ ga-akwa iko ndị mmadụ enwe ụmụ agbọghọbịa so ụlọ bịa ha nye aka mee one of ụmụ na-erutego. Biko ebe ọbụla ọ na-agbagote n'isi oche ebe a akpụgo m ya mbụ. Biko onye acha ebutele da acha ọsịsọ o buterele ha achịcha nwa ya nwe onye ọbụla kwụrụ ọtọ were iko n'elu kwụrụ ọtọ gị ebuli iko n'elu ọ na-akwakwala iko ya wụ
I propose toast maka ọdịmma ndụ ogologo ọmụmụ nwoke ọmụmụ nwanyị ọmụmụ nwoke ọmụmụ nwanyị ọmụmụ nwoke ọmụmụ nwanyị ruo mgbe ọ ga-asị ọ dịla mma wee na-asị ka Chineke gozie ọnọdụ ha na gozikwa ndị niile bịara taa n'aha Jizọs. Thank you.
Yes, ọsọ nụkwa iko ama ga egwere ụkọchukwu so nụkwara iko ebe a taa iko ọnụ gụrụ ebe ọ ga-agara confession. Yes. Yes. Biko ugbu a ada ga-ewere achịcha anyị na-eche ọ ga-esi enye nwoke a ma ọ ga-enye dịkwa ya afọ nne ngwa orule na omume ekpupele nwanne nnukwa mgbaji ọhụrụ na-atọ ka shiga enwe ihe dị mmadụ ihe mego mba ka ọ na-echetara m ihe m chefuru echefu ọ dị egwu nna nnukwu onye gịrị nna eriela atabikwara aka ọ dị egwu nna oriele kwanyere ihe olofe ọgọ mere nna nnukwu ken ngwa gwanyekwana ya aka nnekwa aka ịkpakwa aka nye nkratị ngwa onye ele ma nwaanyị ga-elerekwa ya anya ihe ama ịgbaji ọhụrụ na-atọ ka shuga na-ekpekwara ebe ekpere ọmụba ya sara ya anyị were anya onye na-eme bara gị na nnukwu Baka echetara m ihe m chefuru echefu eziokwu nne ọ dị egwu biko kwara aka ọ dịghị izi yes unu n'anya ihe anyị nwere ebe a taa ihe a na-akpọta mkparel ha ga-eji nwayọọ gbara egwu ha ji nwayọọ ha gbara egwu na-abanye inside ha ji nwayọọ ha gbara egwu electrical and electronic fire sustain, and the ground fire sustain. Government, you know why now say we are saying so Corona Haka, it was my body is really good. Douglas. Thank you very much. The protocol in the committee of friends. Then you want to remember the man, you want to handle it. That you people food. India put a leper and then a demonstration. No, we're going on with tomorrow. And I've got one. I'll take care of that. No minds, no labor. I want to work again. And to the way on the way, and that the play by all the things on our motor. Thank you. Let him work a little work out. I know for me. Yes, my child. My brother, I can get my mega. I'm going to work in our bar in Manga. I got church here. I'm not going to I got best. Yes, all the protocol, committee of friends, start giving people food and drinks. And when my mobile and I search about because my I may chair woman in there. Kahana Bia. DJ, go on. ada na-achọ di ya na ekwe ihe ụmụkọdị na anaghị si ekekele Yes, I don't know. I told you, it's already the easy. It's already the easy. Nada, because now for the primary open I go. I think it's from my wife. Yes. I told you, look, Lala Bayasa. Now they want to work out all of the assets. I'll see himself. Nada. Oh, olha como. Eu tô aqui caçando. Vai, ama. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, I can see Bayelsa United moving back to Heartland of Owerri. Move from the right flank. Move forward in Shandam. Kaluman promotes right one. Move dribble again. Move forward. Okay, Ibrahim. Let's see. Okay, let's see. The ball started at fresh. It's going back. Look by his way. Move front again. From left to right flank to the left flank. Ogoja to Onyema to he moves again to Agamba. He moves from the left flank. Let's see them what I'm saying. Moves again. Pass. She dribble. Okay, she moves front again. Ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, any moment from now, I said, it seems that that one is going to us. Bayelsa United. Ladies and gentlemen, let them see. You see that one? Ladies and gentlemen, the boy is a Donaka. Yes, Iko, onye ọla were nwayọ. Iko ji n'aka na ọ dị ka mbele eji alụ nwaanyị, unu ga-echere ya ebu n'ahịa. Ga-akwụghala ebe ọ wara na mbele eji alụ nwaanyị akọwara. Unu yara ga-arụ ọchịchị egwu. Nna m gbadoro ya ga-ewere anya na ịbụ n'aka ọsịsọ. Waste no time. Yeah, but I'm going to tell you that I'm going to get here passes. Yes. I got here by now. Hold it.
Guys, do the road.
My heart
Sarah Touré, aussi en communication. Hey, Alaji.
Yes, I can almost all our brothers and sisters from Bayelsa State. We thank you very much for your cooperation. Mama, God lead you to say you in Jesus' name. I can also enjoy the Abaja. Don't know me, Chikamoko, Ejimeko, Modobawa, Bonavera, Nana, Mahal.
So Versace, baby, Ramazani.
Biko n'abalị ihe na-eme ekele m Chineke at least ka o si wee mee ka mmadụ niile bịara ebe ọbụla ha si wee bịa n'udo. Mụ na nwunye m obi dị anyị ụtọ n'ụbọchị taa. Anyị kelekwara mmadụ niile na-etufughị oge onye ọbụla. Anyị na-asị biko ụzọ ọbụla onye si wee bịa ka a na-achịkwa n'udo. Anyị na-asịkwa ndị si ihe dị ka Bayelsa wee bịa ka Chineke nke pụrụ ime ihe niile duzie ha ụzọ ha ga-esi wee ka anyị natakwa
ozi dị mma na ha lara n'udo na-asịkwa ụmụnna ndị anyị ga-ahapụ wee nawa ndị nke wụ ndị ụmụ ọwa Chukwu nọnyere ha ka anyị na-ahapụ ha wee nawa Chukwu ga-anọnyekwara ha ndị wụ ndị ụmụnna mmara ha ga-akwụ wee nawa na-asị ka Chineke ji ike niile duo anyị ije ka anyị ga-esi wee na ka ihe niile anyị mere n'ụbọchị nke taata bụrụ ihe dị n'aha nke Chineke anyị na-asị ka Chineke nara ekele nke a n'aha Jizọs Kraịst onye nwe anyị.
Good evening, sir. Please, may we know your name?
My name is Kenneth Chima.
You're welcome. I learned that today is your church wedding and traditional wedding. Can you tell us how you are feeling today?
Ndị kwa anyị nwere ihe nye ndị mmadụ ebe a enweghị ijiri bịa gị ego ebe ahụ kele ha onye kele sọrọ isi onye ekelekwa ya agwago m ọrụ were na ihe ọbụla abịara n'abalị ka ọ were anwụ nta ya bịa hụ ya nwokorobịa na nwunye eji obi ọcha were kpa ya ebe a mgbe anyị ga-eji obi ọcha wee laa n'ezi na ụlọ anyị n'otu n'otu onye ndị azụ enweghị ike ịmụta ya n'otu n'otu.
What are the beautiful things that you see in marriage that makes you to marry today? And please, do you have anyone? Any word of advice to give your wife?
There is no much. I will give her in the house.
Okay, no problem, sir. Thank you very much. In the name of them, and the representatives of Divine International Organization of London, we are wishing you good luck and happy marriage life. Thank you very much.
I'm grateful for what I'm doing. I'm grateful to God to bless everyone.
Everything. Now you get them. This is the phone why I had an idea. Oh, yeah. Again. You're going to go. What a long one. Because other guy they go. We see because anyone. Akaka, Mama Macha. Go on that table. This is Jesus. Okay, ma, but you will not have it. I have a baby back in. Oh, no, the room, okay, because they got the room. As a big one, mother wanted to. Without the job, man, I said, I'm going to Nanka o matare megiri nasi biko be gozera berata gozera ijukata ando birano ija madina so ango sin deruto nyobla ke nanda sakana na kras wo ana wuce ndabo wete wenu
Ìgbéyàwó láyé bọ́ba olúwa mi fi lélẹ̀ pẹ̀lú àṣẹ ni. together. Let no man put asunder.
What God has joined together, let no man put asunder.
What God has joined together, let no man put asunder.
What God has joined together, let no man put asunder.
What God has joined together, let no man put asunder.
What God has joined together, let no man put asunder.
What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. ọkọ yẹn ó máa bọ̀. Èní lọ́jọ́ ìyàwó ọkọ yẹn ó máa bọ̀. Nítorí pé bí ìyàwó bá wọlé ọkọ ìyàwó á tún tẹ̀lé. Torí pé bí ìyàwó bá wọlé ọkọ ìyàwó á tún tẹ̀lé.
Both William and Harry seemed a little overwhelmed by it all, wringing their hands as the nerves began to jangle. They paused at the door to take off their hats and gloves and to sort out their hair. They were greeted by the Dean of Westminster, the Very Reverend Dr. John Hall. As they shook hands with other members of the Abbey chapter, the princes began to relax and enjoy themselves. Prince Harry had promised to embarrass his big brother with his best man speech later in the day, but for now his role was to support William through one of the biggest moments of his life. After a few last words of advice from the Dean, William and Harry began the long walk up the aisle, nodding greetings to the assembled guests as they went. At their side was a man they'd known for many years. Sir Stephen Lamport, now the Receiver General at the Abbey, was private secretary to Prince Charles during the difficult years of Diana's death and beyond. A familiar face to help put William at ease. A kiss for his aunt, Diana's sister, Lady Sarah McCorquodale. Another moment when Diana herself seemed so palpably missing. And he seemed reasonably relaxed as he exchanged a few words with some of his family and friends. Next to arrive at the Abbey was the bride's mother, Carol Middleton. Accompanying her on the short drive from the hotel where they'd been helping Catherine with her final preparations, her son, James. He had been given the honour, as perhaps a sibling at any other wedding would, of being invited to read the lesson at the service. Carol's outfit won universal approval, including from James Sherwood.
Carol Middleton made a very astute choice. She's wearing Catherine Walker, a great favourite of the late Diana, Princess of Wales. She also chose this wonderful powdery blue, which is genius because you know that the senior members of the royal family have to wear colour blocks. You don't compete with it. You know, you have to take a step back. And in the case of the Middletons, I think they were absolutely pitch perfect in the way that they dressed and the way they behaved at the wedding. As well as, I think, doing a remarkable job reading the lesson at the wedding, James Middleton looked simply immaculate. That was terrific tailoring, courtesy of Eden Ravenscroft, the oldest tailor on Savile Row.
At Buckingham Palace, the crowds were warming up for their end of the spectacle. It began in rather a humble way, with a fleet of rented minibuses to transport all but the most senior members of the family. It's not the first time buses have been used. They were hired in for Charles and Camilla's nuptials. It was all part of a conscious effort to minimise security and keep costs down. But the buses were also a sign of the times as the monarchy embraces the 21st century. The crowds cheered as the convoy made its way to the Abbey, and most of the family looked amused to have arrived by a rather novel mode of royal transport. For a woman who was once an air stewardess and is certainly not used to rubbing shoulders with kings and queens, Carol Middleton showed surprisingly few signs of nerves. She was a model of elegance and composure as she made her way to her place in the abbey. But her thoughts must surely have been with her daughter, who was about to step out of ordinary life for good and into a world only a very select few can ever experience.
We can see Lady Helen Taylor and her husband Tim Taylor, the art dealer, she wearing a rather beautiful blue coat embroidered on the hem. And it's a rather nice and rare sight to see the Duchess of Kent wearing a very powdery pink, demure and incredibly appropriate outfit for a royal wedding.
The Gloucesters were just behind them. Princess Michael of Kent, Princess Alexandra with her son James Ogilvy. Among the younger generation of royals, Zara Phillips with her fiancé Mike Tyndall. Theirs will be the next royal wedding.
And Lady Sarah Chatto, the daughter of the late Princess Margaret, is arguably the best dressed at the royal wedding, wearing a rippingly simple flying saucer hat. Lady Sophie Windsor, wearing a very severely chic midnight blue suit with the flying saucer hat worn to an angle, which is important when you're a member of the royal family because you have to be seen.
Peter Phillips and his wife Autumn. Meanwhile, at Clarence House, the crowds were craning their necks to get a good view of the gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom 4 that was taking Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall to the wedding. It was 6 years since their own marriage at Windsor Guildhall. This was a day for a father's pride to swell, as he and Camilla saw for themselves the sheer number of well-wishers, now standing 20 deep, who'd come to celebrate with William.
The Prince of Wales, so his tailors reliably informed me, had put on a little bit of muscle for the wedding, so he couldn't wear his Admiral's full-dress uniform. And Malcolm Plews, who's the head cutter of Welsh and Jeffreys, one of the greatest tailors on the row, recut his uniform, the Admiral's full dress, within about 4 or 5 days, which is a record, and then recycled the gold lace from the uniform and trimmed new uniform with it. This is very interesting because the royal family are known to recycle fashion on a fairly regular basis. Princess Anne is famous for it.
But it was the rather individual fashion taste of Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie which drew more comment than almost anything else. The girls arrived with their father, the Duke of York, closely followed by the Earl and Countess of Wessex.
I do think the Duke of York's daughters were rather unkindly criticised considering their age. It's terribly difficult to wear formal day dress when you're a girl in her teens or early 20s. And these girls obviously want to dress like young girls. They want to have fun with fashion. And unfortunately, they probably won't be able to if every time they want to experiment with a mad Philip Tracy hat or a, in Princess Eugenie's case, a Vivienne Westwood dress, they get the world's press at them. And actually, Princess Beatrice is wearing a rather marvellous nude-coloured Valentino couture coat. I mean, it's a really lovely piece. The Countess of Wessex is quite simply the best-dressed member of the royal family. You can see this champagne silk suit that's very 1950s. It's elaborate, but it doesn't shout at you. And then she supports a new milliner called Jane Taylor. Princess Anne has always been a maverick. She's a horsewoman, she's a hard-working woman. I think she might mildly enjoy fashion, but she dresses more as a royal should dress rather than as a fashion plate. So you will never see her looking inappropriate. She might make interesting choices occasionally, but it is always in the spirit of dressing as a senior member of the royal family.
At Buckingham Palace, the departure of the Queen and Duke. Her chosen colour for this spring day, primrose yellow.
And the Queen wore a dazzling primrose yellow coat dress designed by Angela Kelly. Mrs. Kelly is the Queen's dresser, personal assistant and curator of dress and jewellery. She's the first lady to ever be appointed a personal assistant to the Queen. And many of the Queen's dresses and ensembles have been commissioned in-house. We're told that they're in-house palace designs. So this includes the hats as well as the dresses and coat dresses. The three-strand pearl necklace that the Queen wears and invariably does wear when she's wearing formal day dress was given to her by her grandfather George V in 1935 to celebrate his silver jubilee.
At the Abbey, Prince Charles and the Duchess were given a warm welcome by the crowds. Camilla looked a little nervous, but her elegant costume was voted a winner.
And the Duchess of Cornwall was looking increasingly like a Queen consort. She's wearing an Anna Valentine coat and dress in a very sort of simple silk, but look at the incredible embroidery, the beautiful work, but it yet doesn't overwhelm and it doesn't shout, "Look at me." It's the perfect dress for the stepmother of the bridegroom. And Philip Tracy shows that he can create maximum wonderful millinery with this wonderful piece with the great big broad brim upturned so you see the Duchess's face. And the Duchess of Cornwall was rather fortunate to have been loaned various pieces of jewellery from the Queen Mother's collection, and we can see one particular piece dazzling on her lapel. The brooch that the Queen's wearing is a very special and sentimental piece. It's called the Lover's Knot bow. It was set for Queen Mary, the Queen's grandmother, in the Art Nouveau style of this sinuous curve of diamonds. I mean, the Queen has possibly the most magnificent, if not precious, private jewellery collection in the world. And you'll notice that the Queen's jewellery, she always says something with it. It's entirely sentimental. If you look at her earrings, there are tiny pearl and diamond studs that were given to her by Queen Mary, her grandmother. She wears them every day of her life, unless for a state occasion such as a state dinner. She wears them every day.
On to Horse Guards Parade and the Royal Salute. The Rolls, a 1950 model which was presented to the Queen when she was Princess Elizabeth, made its way through the arch and into the tilt yard. The state trumpeter marked the departure of the Queen and Duke from Buckingham Palace. The huge crowds must have reminded them of the scenes at the Golden Jubilee celebrations 9 years earlier, when 1 million people thronged around the palace to mark the 50th anniversary of the Queen's reign. Today, though, they were proud grandparents above all else, and happy to let William and Catherine take centre stage. By now, the bridesmaids were en route. 4 little girls and 2 page boys, with Catherine's sister Pippa as maid of honour. What a day for them all. Three-year-old Grace Van Kutsen, William's goddaughter, and Camilla's granddaughter, also 3, Eliza Lopez. Behind them, the 7-year-old daughter of the Earl and Countess of Wessex, Lady Louise Windsor, and Viscount Linley's 8-year-old daughter, Margarita Armstrong-Jones. The page boys were Tom Pettifer, the son of William's former nanny, Tiggy-Leg Burke, and Billy Lowther Pinkerton, the son of William's private secretary. A fanfare from the state trumpeters of the Household Cavalry marked the Queen's arrival at the Abbey. A welcome from the Dean of Westminster in his magnificent gold cope. Prince Charles and his wife were there to greet the Queen and Duke. And unusually, as the father and stepmother of the bridegroom, they took their place in the procession ahead of the Queen and Duke. At the Goring Hotel, all eyes were on the specially erected porch and the Rolls-Royce Phantom that was waiting for Catherine. At 10:51, the first glimpse of the bride and that dress. The initial impression was one of great delicacy, with feminine soft layers of ivory silk trimmed with the finest lace. After weeks of speculation, the secret was out. The dress had been designed by Sarah Burton, creative director at Alexander McQueen. And she was on hand to help arrange the gown and its 9-foot train for the journey to the Abbey. Catherine's father, Michael, looked nervous and emotional as he helped her get settled.
And here we had the first glimpse of the dress that I think took the world's breath away. It was designed by Sarah Burton for the house of Alexander McQueen, and it's an incredibly poignant and important moment in British fashion because Mr. McQueen passed away last year, and one didn't know whether the house would survive or not under the stewardship of Sarah Burton, but I think we can safely say that the house is in incredibly safe hands, if not hands of a genius when you look at a dress of this quality. It was commented on that this dress bears a close resemblance to Princess Grace of Monaco's wedding dress when she married Prince Rainier. I actually think that it's better. It's very interesting to me to look at the details, that as much of it was made in England as possible. The lace work on the bodice and on the hem was made by the Royal School of Needlework, and apparently Sarah Burton set up a design studio next door to the Royal School of Needlework in Hampton Court Palace, and a lot of the fittings were executed there because obviously the designer of the dress had to be kept top secret, and it was only given away probably the night before the wedding, when a very eagle-eyed fashion spotter noticed a sort of figure huddled under a fur hat dashing into the Goring Hotel and identified her from her accessories as Sarah Burton.
The crowds went wild. They loved what they could see. But we would all have to wait for the full impact of the dress until the bridal car reached Westminster. And what a journey this must have been for a young woman from a small village in Berkshire. Born a commoner, Catherine Middleton was now on her way to become a princess, a duchess, and one day, queen. As the cheers and screams sounded around her and a forest of flags were waved, she seemed for all the world born to this role. Calm, composed, and gloriously happy. She was on the way to marry the man she loves. After all the speculation, her famously glossy hair was half up and half down, and she was wearing a tiara borrowed from the Queen.
The tiara is very important and very sentimental. In fact, many of the royal jewels are very sentimental. It's called the Halo tiara. It was set for the Queen Mother in 1936. It was then given to the Queen on her 18th birthday, but the Queen seldom wore it because she acceded quite shortly afterwards, and it really is the tiara of a minor princess, of a young princess, and it's exactly right and appropriate that Miss Middleton wore it as she went into the Abbey and then came out as the Duchess of Cambridge. It's almost a semaphore in diamonds for what we should be seeing of royal protocol in jewellery.
This was no doubt the time when her father, Michael, fully realised how different his daughter's life would now be from his own. She was about to become one of the most famous and important women in the world. A few moments ahead of her, the bridal party were making their way into the Abbey.
Well, we see the genius of Savile Row on display here in tailoring these absolutely immaculate Irish Guards uniforms that were designed in-house by the palace but made by Cashcots of Savile Row.
Pippa Middleton led the two youngest bridesmaids by the hand.
And we certainly saw a true star emerge at the royal wedding in the shape and what a shape of Pippa Middleton, the sister of the Duchess of Cambridge, in that incredibly slinky Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen dress, cut on the bias, more reminiscent actually of John Galliano than the late Alexander McQueen, but quite a corker. I mean, we understand from the world's press that websites were set up almost instantly. Twitter went crazy, praising what one would call her rather voluptuous figure, shown off to such great extent. I mean, one would add that a bride would be rather brave to allow a maid of honour to potentially outshine her at a wedding, royal or otherwise. In this case, nothing could outshine the Duchess of Cambridge. But Pippa Middleton has become a huge international star. I think it's quite smart in a way for the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge to allow some of the attention to move over to the Middleton, to allow them to shine too, because it takes the attention away from the new Duke and Duchess, and they may have the privacy that they've actually said that they crave.
Meanwhile, the bridal car was approaching Horse Guards. There was no royal salute here, of course, because Catherine was not yet a member of the royal family. On the return journey, it would be very different.
I did think that it was a very brave choice to use McQueen, because he is known to have a very gothic, very dark side. The house has that reputation for being quite black and quite sombre. So for a wedding it wasn't the most obvious choice, but McQueen also had a romanticism in his soul, I believe. And I think Sarah Burton understood that, and when she took over from the late Alexander McQueen, I think she's brought out more of the romanticism.
Along Whitehall, the crowds were more numerous and vocal than ever. But nothing was going to faze this young bride. At a few seconds past 11 o'clock, the car drew up outside the Abbey. The Dean was there to welcome her, and Pippa, maid of honour for the day, came to help her sister. And this was the first chance for the crowds at Westminster and the television audience around the world to admire the wedding gown. Catherine's bouquet was designed to complement her gown, and it was full of meaning. The lily of the valley signify happiness, the sweet William, not only her husband-to-be, but gallantry. Hyacinth represent constancy and love, and ivy, fidelity. There was also a traditional stem of myrtle, the emblem of marriage, from a plant grown by Queen Victoria, and a sprig from the myrtle plant used in the Queen's wedding bouquet in 1947. This was the moment they'd all been waiting for. The kiss that said it all. Prince William and his bride, the new Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, sent the crowds into a frenzy as they sealed their marriage with a very public show of love. 1 million people had converged on Buckingham Palace to share their happiness. 2 billion people were watching around the world. It was a day that brought a smile to everyone's face. Outside Westminster Abbey, the crowds had begun to gather from early morning. Some hardy souls had spent the past 3 nights camping out to ensure they had the best possible view.
I've been to their wedding, to Queen when she was a youngster. I've followed up with Princess Diana, Margaret, and I'm here today for William. I believe in the royal family.
Oh, I'm here just to experience the whole thing, to see the pomp and the circumstance, and, you know, just to be here and get the feeling of the crowd and the excitement. I love it.
Everyone wanted a ringside seat as Prince William finally tied the knot with Catherine Middleton, the girl he'd met and fallen in love with almost 10 years earlier. A mile or so away, in a luxury suite at the Goring Hotel, the bride and her family were getting ready. Around the corner at Buckingham Palace, the rather grey early morning revealed a quiet calm. But behind the palace walls, the well-oiled machinery of an occasion such as this was already in action. Outside the palace and down the Mall, the crowds who'd spent the night in makeshift tents were beginning to stir. The mood was one of growing excitement at the prospect of the pageantry and partying that was to follow. The doommongers who had predicted that no one would care about the royal wedding were about to be proved comprehensively wrong. At the Abbey, everything was now in place. At William and Catherine's request, 8 imposing trees, maples and hornbeams, had been brought in from the royal estates to mark their route up the aisle. In the splendour of this 1,000-year-old royal peculiar, as it's known, meaning that it's neither a cathedral nor a parish church, 38 sovereigns have been crowned, including, of course, our present Queen. And this was to be the 16th royal wedding to be held at Westminster Abbey. The Queen herself was married here, as was her mother and her sister Margaret. By 9 o'clock, the first of the 1,900 guests had begun to arrive. With roads around the whole area sealed off, they'd been asked to allow plenty of time to get to the Abbey. And this was certainly an occasion that no one wanted to miss. All of them felt privileged to be there to witness a moment in history, the marriage of our future king to a girl who'll one day be Queen Consort. The ushers would have their work cut out, seating 1,000 family and friends of the bride and groom, 50 members of the British royal family, 40 foreign royals, 60 governors-general and prime ministers from around the world, and some 200 diplomats and government officials. 80 representatives from Prince William's charities were also amongst those invited to the society event of the decade. And of course, the fashion stakes were high. Everyone had put in a huge amount of effort, some with more success than others. The fashion expert James Sherwood was among those who cast a critical eye over the results.
The press were sometimes less than kind, but I actually think the occasion was incredibly well dressed. As far as British millinery is concerned, I think the royal wedding has demonstrated that the hat is, if not making a comeback, it's certainly triumphant. And actually what we did see in Westminster Abbey were hats that take a lot of, I don't know, it takes a lot of poise to wear these hats, and it takes a lot of commitment, you know. When one looks at the Queen, formal day dress is the Queen's working wardrobe, but for 90% of the women in the Abbey, this was an exception to a rule and something that they really had to rise to the occasion, and they certainly did. It's rather nice for me to see an occasion like the royal wedding where the uniforms are perfect, the mourning tales are perfect, and the ladies have made a terrific effort. We read from the invitation that it was mourning tales, lounge suits and uniforms were all except that the chaps came down in favour of uniform and mourning tales. And also, you know, we see a lot of RAF uniform because Prince William's currently serving with the RAF in emergency search and rescue. I think what stood out for me at the royal wedding, that it was just lovely to see well-dressed people who know exactly what they're doing, they know how to behave, they're dressed in their best. And you can see waving the Dowager Duchess of Devonshire, Deborah Mitford, the last of the Mitford sisters, with her daughter-in-law, the present Duchess of Devonshire. I always love to see the dowagers because they're almost like galleons sailing forth in the Abbey. It's heaven for me to see, you know, all the pearl chokers with the amethyst clasps and all the classic British family jewels coming out, and see the chaps make the best of themselves too, because I defy any woman to say that a man doesn't look very handsome in a morning coat, especially if it's cut by Savile Row. And Prince Harry's beau, Chelsea Davy, from Cape Town, looking terribly Cape Town, in a sort of Alberta Ferretti cocktail dress, which is almost off the shoulder, almost as acceptable. Off the shoulder is absolutely not, particularly for Westminster Abbey. She's wearing quite a dinky little, it's almost like a button of a hat, designed by Victoria Grant, who I believe is also a favourite of the Duchess of Cambridge.
William and Catherine had been careful not to make this a celebrity event, but a handful of their famous friends were invited. Among them, David and Victoria Beckham.
I think David Beckham's made many a heart swoon as he walked up the Abbey with the new hairstyle, the Elvis, the quiff. Unusual to see a cravat. Mr. Beckham pulls this off, of course, with his usual style. He's wearing Ralph Lauren, almost bespoke, made to measure, I think we'd call it. Mrs. Beckham had the dress for the Victoria Beckham label. A lot of the press thought it was black and made appropriate comments, saying that, you know, she looked as though she was in mourning. It's not, it's a midnight blue silk. She is pregnant, and I think she looks absolutely magnificent.
Elton John was there.
I thought it was rather marvellous that the lion's share of the chaps in the Abbey actually wore mourning tails. I mean, even Sir Elton John and his partner David Furnish.
The film director Guy Ritchie is a friend of both William and Catherine.
And here we have Guy Ritchie, who's played it incredibly safe, wearing a terribly traditional black morning coat with the pinstripe trouser and the grey waistcoat. Grey or buff waistcoats are really the form for formal day dress, but at the wedding we did see these wonderful, quite bright yellow waistcoats that seemed to set a fashion. It was terrific to see. We note that the Queen has let it be known that she rather likes morning coats to be buttoned. She doesn't like them to be left unbuttoned.
Tara Palmer Tompkinson, an old family friend, seemed intent on making quite a fashion statement.
And the socialite Tara Palmer Tompkinson in this electric blue number that really is off the shoulder. And this sort of boat-shaped hat that points directly down on her nose. It's a very similar shape to Princess Eugenie's, both designed by Philip Tracy. In fact, one would go so far as to say that Philip Tracy probably had a patent on the entire wedding.
Ben Fogle, the TV presenter and adventurer, made a documentary with William in Africa and has since become a friend. For his heavily pregnant wife, Marina, the biggest worry of the day was that she would go into labour.
Ben Fogle, the television presenter, a very popular sight in the Abbey. I do love that sort of crazy public school hair. Other nationalities would think it looked a bit sloppy, but actually to the Brits that's perfectly pucker.
Also among the guests at the Abbey, the journalist Tom Bradby, who's known the couple for some time and who was invited to conduct their engagement interview. His wife, Claudia, is a jewellery designer, and she once worked with Catherine. The Prime Minister, David Cameron, wore traditional morning dress, but his wife, Samantha, surprised fashion pundits by choosing to go hatless.
The green Burberry dress I did think looked absolutely appropriate. Wouldn't it have been so much better to have seen a hat with that ensemble?
The Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg, and his wife, Miriam, played it safe.
It was interesting that all the British politicians dithered about wearing morning tails because they thought it would possibly make them look slightly upper class. Actually, it just makes you look terribly well dressed, as in the case of Nick Clegg, the leader of the Liberal Democrat Party and the Deputy Prime Minister. Sir John Major dresses to prove why he absolutely did belong in the Abbey in an immaculate black morning coat. And you notice the British gentlemen always mismatch, and so Sir John Major, we see the sort of baby blue tie, the very faded pink shirt and the grey waistcoat. It's actually spot on, totally correct. And it's always rather nice to see the foreign royals out in full force. The King of Tonga is an incredibly popular figure. You notice that he wore a double-breasted morning coat. It's almost more cut like a frock coat, which is most unconventional, but actually it dates back to the Edwardian era.
The last great occasion to be held in the Abbey was the funeral of the Queen Mother in 2002. And 5 years earlier, the Abbey had been the venue for one of the most traumatic events in Prince William's life, the funeral of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. But now his friends, colleagues and family were gathering for a day that signalled a new and bright chapter in William's life. But a day when, no doubt, his mother's absence would be felt more poignantly than ever. Grand royal occasions like this are timed to the minute, and at 10:10, the crowds outside Clarence House knew that William was about to set out on his final journey as a single man. A burgundy Bentley, polished to perfection, rolled out of the gates. At last, the real show was about to get on the road. And what a show it was. Prince William looked distinguished in the famous red uniform of the Irish Guards, of which he's an honorary colonel. Having served with the Army, Navy and the RAF, he was eligible to wear any of their ceremonial uniforms. Guard's striking red tunic, with his blue garter sash and star, and his RAF wings.
And we see Prince William looking rather dashing in the uniform of an honorary colonel in the Irish Guards. It had been rumoured for months that he would be wearing an RAF uniform tailored by Gibbs and Hawkes of Savile Row. This would have been in keeping because his great-grandfather, the late King George VI, wore RAF uniform and had permission from George V to wear it because it's not the uniform of the senior service.
Prince Harry, his best man, looked equally dashing in the uniform of a captain of the Household Cavalry, Blues and Royals.
Prince Harry, tailored by Dijon Skinner, is wearing the uniform of the Blues and Royals. He and his brother were painted for a National Portrait Gallery piece 2 years ago wearing the uniform of the Blues and Royals, so it was rumoured that both of the chaps would wear the same uniform. I think it's rather wise that Prince William chose instead to wear the Irish Guards.
For some of the more stalwart royal fans who'd spent the night on a hard, cold London pavement, this was their second encounter with the princes. A handful had been able to chat with them the night before, when William and Harry had suddenly come out of Clarence House to thank the crowds for their support and good wishes. This was very much part of the younger generations steering a new course. Later, it was revealed that Harry and William had made the decision on a whim and caught their press office by surprise. Now, as he made his way to the Abbey, to a crescendo of cheers, William might well have been feeling more than the few nerves he'd admitted to the night before. "All I have to do is get my lines right," he'd told the crowds. An obvious reference to his parents' own wedding, when they'd both fluffed their lines. The reality of his wedding day, though, was proving that this was truly a global event. People had come from all over the world to watch the procession and join in the celebrations. As the princes approached Horse Guards, the band of the Coldstream Guards salute. One day it will fall to William as sovereign to take the salute here at the annual Trooping the Colour Parade. As the Princess of Wales once told me, the prospect of being king was something her son viewed as a great burden when he was young. Since then, Prince William has become resigned to his destiny, and perhaps now, as the crowds showed their real affection for him, it didn't seem so bad. And how proud Diana would have been of her 2 boys, now all grown up and so handsome. As they approached the Abbey, the bells rang out, and the crowds who'd been waiting patiently got their first look at the man of the moment. Both William and Harry seemed a little overwhelmed by it all, wringing their hands as the nerves began to jangle. They paused at the door to take off their hats and gloves and to sort out their hair. They were greeted by the Dean of Westminster, the Very Reverend. As they shook hands with other members of the Abbey chapter, the princes began to relax and enjoy themselves. Prince Harry had promised to embarrass his big brother with his best man speech later in the day, but for now his role was to support. After a few last words of advice from the Dean, William and Harry began the long walk up the aisle, nodding greetings to the assembled guests as they went. At their side was a man they've known for many years. Sir Stephen Lamport, now the